Welcome back to the Friday wrap-up, where we look at the weekly absurdity of planet Earth. Let's start in Wisconsin, a state where the wildlife is usually just aggressive cheese and depressed deer. This week, a kangaroo named Chesney decided he was done with the petting zoo life. He looked at an 8-foot fence, realized he was basically a giant biological spring, and just bounced into the American Midwest. They launched a massive 3-day manhunt. The local authorities literally had to rent heat-seeking drones. Think about that for a second. You're a drone operator in rural Wisconsin. You're looking at your thermal camera, expecting to see a lost golden retriever, and suddenly you see a bouncing velociraptor with a pouch heading toward a Culver's drive-thru. And how did they finally catch him? They didn't tackle him. The zookeeper just went out into the woods with his favorite snacks, sat down, and the kangaroo eventually hopped over like, "Hey man, the woods are cold and there's no Wi-Fi out here. Take me home." Now, speaking of animals dealing with our nonsense, let's talk about Jonathan. Jonathan is a giant tortoise living on the island of St. Helena. He is 193 years old. He was born before the telegraph was invented. Napoleon Bonaparte literally died on his lawn. But this week, Jonathan was forced to deal with the absolute worst invention in human history: crypto bros. Someone on Twitter created a fake April Fool's post claiming Jonathan had died, just so they could ask for cryptocurrency donations for his funeral. A tortoise funeral! What are you gonna buy with Ethereum? A really slow hearse? The actual government of St. Helena had to issue an official press release to the world saying, "He is not dead! He is just sleeping! He is 19-3 years old! Let the man nap!" Jonathan doesn't want your Bitcoin, Kevin. He wants a piece of lettuce and to be left alone for another 2 centuries. Finally, we need to talk about the global epidemic of scamming parents in empty warehouses. Last year, we had the infamous Glasgow Willy Wonka experience. You remember that one? They promised a world of pure imagination. And what they delivered was a single jelly bean, a sad woman in a green wig, and a villain named the Unknown hiding behind a mirror. Well, someone looked at that international disaster and said, "Hold my pink lemonade." This week, a so-called immersive Barbie event had to issue mass refunds after parents realized they had walked into the exact same trap. They expected the glamorous dream house. They got a damp room with bad acoustics and a folding table. Imagine the emotional damage. You dress your 6-year-old up in her finest pink glitter. You hype her up for Barbie land. You walk through the doors. And instead of Ryan Gosling's Ken on a pristine beach, it's just a guy named Greg in a high-vis vest telling you the porta potties are out of order. Imagine the emotional damage. You dress your 6-year-old up in her finest pink glitter. You hype her up for Barbie land. You walk through the doors, and instead of Ryan Gosling's Ken on a pristine beach, it's just a guy named Greg in a high-vis vest telling you the porta potties are out of order. These event organizers are just using AI to generate posters of a magical wonderland, and then renting out abandoned distribution centers. At this point, if you buy a ticket to an immersive pop-up event, you should just assume you are funding a local spirit Halloween store. Come on, people, Barbie doesn't live in a damp industrial park. She has a mortgage. Now, let's head over to the UK, where the educational system is currently under siege by a 15-year-old boy who simply refused to do algebra. This week, an entire academy in St. Neots was thrown into an emergency lockdown. Police were called. Evacuation protocols were initiated, sirens blaring. Why? Because a 15-year-old called in a bomb threat. Now, usually, this is where I'd talk about the collapse of modern society. But let's look at the motivation here. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He didn't have a grand political manifesto. He just really didn't want to take his math test. Think about the sheer, unadulterated dedication to procrastination. Instead of just faking a stomachache like a normal teenager, or telling his mom he ate a bad piece of fish, this kid decided to commit a major felony. He looked at a quadratic equation, realized he forgot to study, and said, "You know what? I'd rather risk 3 to 5 years in a youth detention center than figure out what X equals." And here's the absolute best part of the story. The police arrested him and released him on bail, and his official bail condition from the judge, he is legally banned from going anywhere near the school. He won! He got exactly what he wanted! He doesn't have to take the math test. He doesn't have to wake up early. And the UK justice system literally made it illegal for him to attend class. He successfully used the police department as a doctor's note. I don't condone his actions. But as a former student, you have to respect the strategy. Math is hard, handcuffs are temporary.